My health improved after a few days. I no longer needed Anna's help and asked her not to come anymore. One evening Ted appeared. He was drunk, a bottle sticking out of his pocket, a cigar smoking in his mouth.
"How are you feeling, señorita?"
he asked, falling on the couch. I said nothing and turned my back to him.
"You are angry for my slap. You shouldn't, girl. It saved you from the worst."
He took my hand, pulled me towards him and sat me on his lap. I tried to resist, but I couldn't do anything against his brute strength.
"Anyway, you're going to get lost here."
Suddenly the door opened, and Anna appeared on the threshold. "You are invited to the guests." Ted threw me off his lap like a kitten and stood up.
"Who? Me?"
"Not you, but the girl."
"Ah, the girl. Or maybe I will come instead."
Ted grabbed Anna by the shoulder.
"Girl is busy. I'm interrogating her. Got it? And don't let any bastards come in here. Got it? Now go away."
And he kicked her out the door.
"Now no one will disturb us."
Ted sat down on the couch again.
"Come here.
I went up to him, and he sat me down on his lap again.
Let's have a drink. This is the rum tortuga."
I don't know where I got the courage from, but I drank a few sips of rum straight from the bottle.
"Well done, little one. I like you more and more."
He praised me.
"So listen, I had to slap you to save you from torment, and the Japanese is a master at these things. And the boss didn't mind, he was tired of messing around with you. He was mad at me for knocking you out, and I swore that I would get all the strength out of you, but I would get the truth. He was hard to persuade on the condition that you would go out to guests and work like all the girls. Let's have a drink and think about what to do next."
He took another sip of rum.
"And the hell did I hook up with you? What's so good about you? You will be a girl like everyone else."
Despite his rudeness, I wasn't scared at all. I even began to feel sympathy for him, and his threats aroused my curiosity. It was clear that he wasn't a bad person.
"Will you drink or not?"
Ted deftly popped the cork from the bottle of whiskey. Instead of answering, I jumped off his lap and, grabbing the bottle from his hands, threw it into the corner. "That's enough," I said. "You need to rest, because you're very drunk. Lie down on the sofa and sleep. And we'll think about it in the morning." In saying this, I had two goals: to delay the unpleasant conversation until the morning and at the same time to feel under his protection. Ted looked at me in fright. Apparently, no one had ever treated him like this before. His face was so surprised that for the first time in a while I burst out laughing so sincerely. Looking at me, he also laughed.
"Well done, señorita. Well done."
And he slapped me on the ass so that I screamed in fright and sat down. And he laughed loudly.
"No, baby, I will rest only in the next world. But for now, I don't mind sleeping, especially with such a doll."
He got up from the sofa and slowly began to undress. He took off his shirt and pants and remained only in his underpants. His body was covered with hair, and his muscles were extremely strong. Frightened, I huddled in the corner of the sofa, looking at him with fear and waiting for the worst.
"Then we'll rest, huh?"
He winked at me and, grabbing me, threw me on the bed. He collapsed next to me. I was trembling as if in a fever, afraid to even move, and he stretched himself to his full length and said,
"Don't be afraid. You think I need such a little girl? But I don't believe Hanako. He works for us, but apparently he does not offend his own. What do you think?"
"I don't know. I just hate him."
"I have a suspicion that he does work for his own. And Hanako is scarier than me. Do you know what he would do to you because of this note?"
From his words, I instinctively leaned against Ted, wrapping my arm around his neck. To my surprise, the hair on his body was very soft, and I wanted to pet him. And he continued to tell me all kinds of fears about Japanese torture. "Shut up, I'm scared." He laughed and hugged me.
"It's not scary with me. Don't be afraid."
His body smelled of men's sweat, and his thick hair tickled his skin. His muscles tensed like those of Hercules. I really felt that as long as I am with him, I am not afraid of anything. Suddenly his hand fell on my shoulder and gently squeezed it. I suddenly shuddered and tried to pull away. But he held me tightly to him, and his hand was greedily probing my body, reaching the most secret places. His fingers were large and rough, but they slid so carefully over the body that I did not want to push them away at all. Ted's caress caused a mixed feeling of pleasure, shame and fear. After all, I was touched by a man's hand for the first time. True, theoretically I knew all this and had the opportunity to observe all kinds of pleasures, but physically I was still a girl. As Ted began to touch my body, I felt an extremely pleasant weakness, and a sweet shiver ran through my body. But fear still drowned out the pleasure. And not only fear. I felt a painful shame. My body tensed and, jumping back sharply, I broke out of his arms and slid to the floor. Ted jumped off the couch in a frenzy. For a moment I thought he was going to beat me, but he restrained himself and, getting dressed, said,
"You don't want as you want. It will be worse for you. Think about it. Some kind of inconsistency. Let's see what you say when you find yourself face to face with a guest for the first time. You know what they do with a girl there."
I knew from conversations that a lot of money was paid for an innocent girl. But no one told me anything about what happens next. And Ted continued.
"You will be led out with a wreath of roses on your head, and you must offer each guest a glass of wine. You will be evaluated and looked at from all sides. At the same time, you will stand on the table and everyone will be able to touch you. And then you will belong to the one who paid the most."
Ted got dressed and headed for the door.
"So what? Don't you want to come with me? Of course, it will be more fun with guests."
He opened the door. What am I doing? If he leaves, it's all gone. He is better than this whole pack of hungry hyenas. I quietly said, "Don't go, Ted. I have no choice." He smiled contentedly and closed the door. Although, no. Go. His face stretched out, a curse fell from his lips. He turned around sharply. "And bring water or wine," I said with a smile. He laughed and looked at me with admiration.
"Ah, devil, how charming you Italian women are. Senorita, just a moment."
And Ted, with a gallant bow, went out. When he left, I finally decided to play on his feelings and choose less of all the dangers. I thought that if I tamed Ted, he could be of great use to me, even though I would have to sacrifice my body for that. But I still can't avoid it. Maybe it will work out. I thought and began to prepare for the role of a mistress. Approaching the mirror, I threw off my dressing gown and examined myself carefully. In my years I have already reached maturity. My figure was graceful. Slender beautiful legs, a fairly wide pelvis and full hips formed a beautiful contrast with a thin waist and small wrinkles. My hair was combed in a tight knot in the Japanese style. I quickly let my hair down, and it fell on my shoulders in a thick, silky wave. A real beauty was looking at me from the mirror, shining with youth and charm. It seemed that the legendary Frida herself had turned into a living, charming girl. I laid down on the couch. The door opened without a knock and Hanako's smiling face was looking at me. I screamed in fright, but a sudden wave of wild fury drowned out all my senses. Grabbing the bottle that was close at hand, I launched it at the yellow devil. But Hanako deftly dodged and immediately Ted's angry voice rang out.
"What the hell? What bastard threw the bottle? If my eye is damaged, then I will take out 2 of it."
An angry Ted appeared at the door. Hanako tried to slip out of the room, but Ted slammed his hand into his jaw so hard that he fell over. Killed. A thought occurred to me and, although I froze in place from horror, nevertheless, my soul suddenly felt light. That was how hateful this Japanese was to me. Hanako lay breathless. Ted stepped over him and walked over to the mirror, his back to the uninvited guest. Suddenly, Hanako leapt to her feet. A knife flashed in his hand. "Ted!" I screamed in horror. But Ted had already managed to intercept the hand with the knife. A second, and Hanako fell back to the floor with her arm twisted, and Ted calmly dropped the knife on the table in front of the mirror.
Such things will not pass here, my friend. I've been stuck in your quagmire too long to be fooled so easily. And now just run. And if you cross my path again, your head will forever look back.
Ted opened the door, and the Japanese bowed, but without taking his eyes off him, stepped back toward the door. Before leaving, he gave me a look full of such hatred that I involuntarily covered my face with my hands. The door closed.
The only thing that reassures me is that this blow was intended for the yellow devil. And where do you have such strength from? Half an inch lower and I'd be eyeless. But at least this yellow dog will remember me for a long time.
Ted turned to me. His appearance was not attractive. The eyebrow is cut, blood is on the temple. I felt sorry for him. After all, it was the work of my hands. Does it hurt you a lot? After all, I didn't do it on purpose. He smiled wryly.
There is no guarantee that you won't do it again. Crazy girl.
My mood lifted again. I liked Ted more and more. Wait, I will help you now. I jumped off the sofa, took out cotton wool, a bandage, poured water into a basin. Come here, I'll wash you. Ted obediently walked over and knelt down in front of me. His head was at the level of my breasts, and he had obviously just noticed that I was completely naked. His eyes widened and blinked often. I was amused, but with a serious face I washed his wound and applied a bandage. Now he looked like a pirate. You sure are a pirate from an old adventure novel, Mr. Ted. Instead of an answer, he, standing on his knees, began to kiss me greedily, and so tenderly, so sincerely, that a sweet weakness came over me, which deprived me of control over my body. It was much more pleasant than Anna's kisses, although they awakened my sensuality. Let's lie down. I don't know how I said that, although it was very quiet. But he heard, picked me up in his arms and, covering my body with kisses, began to carry me around the room. I laughed. I felt so good for the first time. You tickled me with your kisses. Put me in my place. He carefully lowered me onto the bed and took a step back. His eyes were shining, his hands were shaking. It seemed that he would now rush at me and eat me. But I was not afraid. I felt that now Ted was in my power. That he was my slave.